All right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. The conversation begins right now. We are calling it Youth and Climate Change, but mostly we'd like to know, how do we ensure that the young people are at the front line when it comes to fighting climate change? Is it mitigation or adaptation? The jury is still out on that. What needs to be done? What initiatives have the young people already put in place to ensure that they are fighting climate change in their own respective jurisdictions? This is coming just a few days to the Africa Climate Summit, but just before that, 3 days, that's between 1st to 3rd of September, there's Africa Youth Climate Assembly that's happening just in the build-up to the Africa Climate Summit. So we want to know, how are the youth going to be integrated into the conversation around climate change, and how can they be empowered more so that they become the front line and the defense to this? Helping me with this conversation is Elizabeth Wadhuti, Lead Coordinator, Africa Youth Climate Assembly. Thank you very much for making time. Alphonse Mui from the Secretariat of the Africa Youth Climate Assembly as well. Thank you very much for making time. Brian Maina is also here from the Secretariat of the Africa Youth Climate Assembly. Eugene Oponyo, Chairperson, Wazalendo Movement. Asante sana for making time. Shampi Anna, Climate Change Coordinator, UCSPAK, is also with us here in studio. Thank you very much for making time. Still waiting for Evans Abok, an environmental scientist, so that we talk about this conversation as well. But we'd like to hear from you mostly at Trevor Mbij at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. And Liz, I'll start with you on this. I've seen some of the objectives of the African Youth Climate Assembly, and one of them is to amplify youth voices. How is this supposed to happen? What is the general plan around it?
Thank you so much, Trevor, for having us here today. I'll make that question very practical, because when you talk about amplifying, it's about how we can be able to use the platform that the Africa Climate Summit is giving us through the Youth Assembly and all through to the Africa Climate Summit to showcase exhibitions, to showcase innovations, to showcase ideas of young people that are doing great and amazing things out there. And what the team has been doing for the past few weeks and the past few months has been even meeting up with some of the young people across the country and across the continent that are innovating and that are creating solutions to address the climate crisis. And I can highlight a few of them. For instance, just recently we met with some young children, Jeremy and Michelle from Kisumu. And these are young children that have created an app that is called Ziwa Safi. And this app is helping them collect climate data. It's helping them collect plastic pollution data. And what they're using is what they're calling citizen science. And these are children that have sat down, innovated, and are addressing solutions to the climate crisis. And definitely they ought to have a place as well at the Assembly to showcase this app that they're doing as well. We've also had different groups like the Timau group that is actually innovating and using plastic waste to be able to create building materials that are affordable. So ideally, they are also contributing to affordable housing by providing climate-related solutions. So these are just a few examples. And we have more from around the world as well. We have different young people as well from Uganda that are creating what we call like sustainable fashion, and they're really addressing the whole issue of fast fashion that is really a great contributor to climate change. And what they're doing is that they are using textiles and using like banana fibers and organic cotton to be able to create affordable clothes as well that are sustainable. So if you look at all these ideas, it means that these young people do deserve to have a space at this forum, a forum that has business leaders, a forum that has heads of states, a forum that has different people and investors that can be able to support these young people to grow their innovations. So these are some of the things we are looking at, really practical solutions that youth bring to the table, and then giving them a spot to exhibit and also an opportunity to be able to meet with heads of states, with business leaders, and different people that are at the summit so that they can upscale their solutions to the next level.
Yeah. Alphonse, what is the greatest challenge to having youth included in this conversation? And this I'd like to hear from the entire team. What do you think is the greatest challenge of inclusion of the young people? Is it the messaging that is different and they don't understand it, or is it that they don't have the platforms to showcase what they've already had? Because you can tell me something, but if I don't have a platform to explain to you that I've understood, then it's as good as not having told me at all.
Sure, Trevor. Yeah, the biggest actually problem with young people has been what we call meaningful youth engagement. And this, speaking to your question, I think young people, there's a mental model that young people are just out there to complain, to protest, to do all this manner of things, but not to bring expertise, not to be engaged as people who are solution providers. And we are up actually with this Africa Youth Climate Assembly to change that kind of mentality and instill in our leaders, instill in everybody out there that young people are experts in their own rights. Young people are actually leaders of today. And there's a lot that we can do, not only in ensuring that we turn around the Titanic without actually sinking it, and ensure that young people also, whatever solutions that they are fronting, when Africa was kind of fighting colonialism long time ago, look at the people who are championing for it, young people, you know. Thomas Sankara just became a president at the age of 33, for example. C. Nelson Mandela, all this began in their 20s. So what changed until young people became to be seen as people who are out there just not to bring anything? So we are here right now fighting for that space and ensure that young people are included in discussions that are about the future. Because everything that is ratified today, who are going to live the realities of those decisions? It's us young people. So we have to ensure that in every decision, young people have a say. And in this Africa Climate Summit that is coming up, first of its kind, young people, I mean, African leaders across the continent coming together to craft the way forward to combating climate crisis, young people are actually taking the center stage in those discussions.
Brian, what does meaningful youth engagement
Thank you
like
so much, Trevor.
What is that?
I do believe that that's one of the most challenging things that we can always try to understand. Because every single time I sit down with young people, I always want to understand, when I say meaningful engagement, what does it mean to you? Because again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. And the one thing I've come to learn is inclusion. Making sure that these young people have a space. And not just a space. For the last few years, we've been in this climate journey. And the one thing I've come to learn over just deliberating and sitting down with young people is that these people have actual solutions. They have actual meaningful things that they really want to bring to the table. And how do we do this? The idea is that at some point, and as my colleagues have said, the biggest challenge we face is that people see us as picketers. Every single place we go to, people see us as people who just want to be tokenized. And we're at a point in life whereby we really don't want someone giving us a position just because they want to fill a gap. We really do believe that if I am Brian, I have gone to school, I have an understanding of what needs to be done, and the best thing to do is to bring everyone together. Nowadays, we're speaking about intergenerational and intragenerational dialogues. Why are we speaking of this? We want people to sit down and engage, learn from each other. There's an old adage that says that we can learn from even children, but at the same time, I remember one of my greatest mentors, who was also an anchor just as yourself, Komla Dumo, said, up until the lion learns how to write, the story will always glorify the hunter. My colleague has just put it out well in a very clear manner. The biggest challenge we're facing right now, and the reason why we don't have meaningful engagement, is because the narrative is still not told the right way. So it is time for us to rewrite the story. It is time for us to now make sure that even our grandparents understand that we bring something to contribute. Because if it doesn't fall in the society where people in the society believe that young people have something meaningful to speak, and we're still told that keep quiet, you are a child, then there's no day that someone who has solutions at our age will ever sit on that high table. So it is time for us to make sure that we are able to shift the way people see things, we're able to shift the way the older generation perceives the younger generation, and that together they can come and create solutions together. That's what we're trying to push for, because we're already doing it. And I've always said, if you don't get a seat at the table, bring your own seat, bring your own table. They will join you at that table at some point.
Okay. Interesting views there. Eugene, what does meaningful youth engagement look like to you? Because I know as the team for Wazalendo, you had even taken some initiatives to Kakamega, was it, when you planted more than 400 trees? But what does meaningful engagement look like to you?
Thank you, Trevor. Like you've said, I'm the chairperson of Wazalendo movement. And this is a movement of the patriots, by the patriots, for the patriots. Not necessarily in Kenya, but in the entire Africa. If you look at the current conversation whereby there is a lot of young people who feel like Africa is not the place you need to be right now. But Africa is the light for the entire world. Africa has arable lands. So we need to steer ahead the youthful engagements into the climate change. And the reason why I love your question, because I can say from the grassroots level, there haven't been meaningful engagements on climate change about the youth. There are many people, I'm always in the slums, I'm always in Kibera, I'm always in Kawangware, I'm always in Madare, but there are many young people who can't even understand what climate change is. So for me, before we dive deeper into the conversation, I am for the opinion, let's tell the young people what is climate change, first of all. You know, there are people who have made climate change information messaging so difficult and complex to a point people think it is not something someone can decode. It needs maybe some high IQ for you to understand what climate change is. But climate change is basically the change in patterns of weather and temperatures. If you see the way it has been currently, there is a lot of heat waves. There is droughts coming in. There is floods, and the young people, not like they don't want to be engaged in these meaningful talks, but because they feel sidelined. Why do they feel sidelined? We have the people in government, the people in the NGOs, the people who are advocating for this are not of their age. But think of it, if you have people my age coming out to speak passionately about climate change, young people start coming out and engage into these talks. But you cannot say someone who is in their 40s, someone who is in their 50s, someone who is in their 60s, trying to talk about the future. What do they know about the future? At least maybe for a 40-year-old. What does a 60-year-old person know about the future? Yet these are the people talking about the future generations. Why should they talk about the future generations year to year? We are the ones who are supposed to advocate for the rights and involvement of the young people into this forum of the climate change. So climate change, it is a conversation that needs to be scaled down to the people down there. So we did an initiative in Kakamega because we are the young people, we don't own land. Yeah. You wait for your parent to inherit land from your parent. A majority of Kenyans can't even afford to buy land. So majority of Kenyans own land by inheritance. So and you know how the African parents are. You cannot just wake up and decide to plant a tree. You have to ask them. So we came up with an initiative as Wazalendo Movement for Panda Miti kwa Mzae. Panda Miti kwa Mzae simply means I don't need to come and inspect whatever you are doing. But as a group, we meet virtually, always. We are the young people, we don't need to meet one-on-one. We can do Zoom calls and all that. And then we ask you, what have you been doing at your parents' land? Have you planted a tree? How many have you planted? So that is how we've been trying to engage with the young people in this conversation. Okay. But the most detrimental thing that I feel is there's an African summit coming up in Nairobi. But I can assure you, Trevor, if you go outside here, there are less people, less young people who will partake in that summit. They don't even know what is happening in, at the Kenya, at KICC. Yeah. So it is the messaging that has made young people feel like this is not something for me to do. This is something for other people to partake in. Okay. Not knowing people are discussing our future. And when someone is discussing your future, it is like when the teacher is speaking or the lecturer is speaking. You need to listen because this person is instilling knowledge into you. Yeah. But there is information coming out, but the young people are not not participating. And the reason why, the key reason why they are not participating is the people who are pushing the agenda, they are old men and women. And this is a time we need to tell the old men and women, both in government, in the non-governmental organizations, that we are coming for these positions. Okay. We are not coming for these positions to sit and the way them have been sitting. Okay. I don't believe there's an older person with a great idea than a young person. Okay. If you are a young person, you should have great ideas than an old person. And that's the next thing we're going to go to, because it's an interesting perspective you bring, intergenerational dialogue. There's also that coming up. So we'll find out where do you draw the balance. But let's hear from Shampi on this. And also Evan Sabok is now joining us, is an environmental scientist. Yes, they're the ones who complicate climate change, but we'll speak to you. But Shampi, what does meaningful youth engagement look like for you?
Thank you so much, Trevor, for having me today. Yeah. There's a video I was watching of, it's a 1930 clip. There was an old woman, she was seated, and she was saying, young people have become opinionated nowadays. During our time, we never used to be like this. And she continued on and on and on about how the generation that is there, 1930s, is so bad, not like the one that was there. And then it occurred to me, this is something that has always been happening, that intergenerational gap has always existed, that the generation before the one that came before it always has like a negative opinion of the generation that is coming after it. And so it it even worsens during our time because now we are branded as Gen Zs, as the young people. And when they call us Gen Z, you ask them our characteristics, they'll say things like they're ignorant, they don't want to be involved, they don't want to work hard, they want things to be brought to them, and that is a very bad notion. Trevor, you can see the faces, you can see the people that are sitting right here, and this, we are just but representative. There are many others that are actually interested in the development of their countries, that are actually interested in what really affects their communities. And that is on the narratives and why it's actually very difficult for us, the youth, to want to thrive in such spaces because of such opinions towards us. And I also want to contribute to what Eugenia said on information. Generally, people, even the ones that are in the universities, because that is where I work in. I work in universities and colleges, Students' Peace Association of Kenya. My main focus is on youth peace and security, but of course we can't talk about these things if you're not talking about climate change. And right now there's the nexus between climate change and security is so strong, we can't run away from it. I am from Moyale in Marsabit County. The issue of, I can't talk about climate change without talking about security. In fact, I can't talk about any issue without talking about climate change, which therefore means that me as a youth, I must. Me as a youth who has gone to school and I have an area of influence with the kind of people that I work in. I work with students in the universities, people who are capable of bringing solutions to the table. I have a responsibility to want to know more and to educate also my peers. So now, when we're talking about information breakdown, which is the main problem, first of all, there is that lack of talking about climate change, young people will tell you, sinikupanda miti, nikuongelea kuhusu environmental degradation, but no one we just want to keep the temperature in Earth we cap it at 1.5 and under 2 degrees, but no one is asking themselves why. And even others ask, climate change is not that serious. See, it's just the rise in temperature from 1.5 to 2 degrees. Kwani, how bad is that? But no one actually tells us the gravity of the situation, that the Earth's atmosphere is so sensitive that the slightest changes in the pressure, in everything, affects everything. It affects the speed of winds. The 6 failed rainy seasons. We are getting droughts, unprecedented droughts, things we've never ever seen before. And so it now begs the question that people don't have the right information, and even if they have, it's just a tip of the iceberg. They don't have what is below that. And even those ones that completely do not have, they know something is wrong. Even my grandmother in Moyale, even my auntie who has not gone to school, she knows something is wrong. The youth know something is wrong. When we were growing up, Trevor, where are the butterflies? Where are the bees? Where are all these beautiful things we saw while growing up? Hata kumbikumbi zimepotea, we can't see them anymore. So people know something is wrong, but it is the way maybe the information is packaged that it seems so complex, so much English, so much policy work. It's just so hard. If a way can be found to educate the youth, because given our population and the energy that we have and the gist that we have, these things should not go to waste. Yeah. It should, information should be packaged in a way that really makes sense to us and brings this urgency to our situation. Yeah. And just to lastly on this point, yeah. I used to engage myself in a lot of tree planting. I used to engage myself, in making sure there are terraces just to ensure there's no soil erosion and so on and so forth. Things of environment really used to interest me. But it took me going to Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice, yeah. which is an initiative of Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance that is usually held annually. And it brings together very many youth from all across Africa to just come together and educate them on matters of climate justice. Yeah. It was until I went there that I actually realized these things. It was until I went there that this legalese language was actually broken down into something that, really touched my heart and made me realize that matters of climate justice are actually very personal. And me as a youth, I must fight to get involved into these spaces. Me as a youth, especially coming from the ASAL regions, I have seen with my bare eyes what my people are going through, yeah. and I want to do something about it.
Okay. Evans, as an environmental scientist yourself, how bad is the situation?
Thank you, Trevor, for having me. First, I would like to say that I've had the privilege to explore the discipline of environmental science at depth, and I do understand that the situation is worse than people perceive it. Usually people perceive climate change as, increase in temperature. So if they don't experience increase in temperatures, then they conclude that we are better off. But the truth is the truth is climate change manifests in different ways in different parts of the world. Actually, it could even lead to lower temperatures in some parts of the world. So the notion that you have to experience heat waves like they do in the US or in the European countries is actually a misinformation that I think we should try as young people, as young scientists, to demystify, and ensure that people are well informed about climate change. So the situation, I have to say, is worse. There is compelling evidence pointing to, the situation being exacerbated by other factors that come together, a confluence of other factors, that actually exacerbate the climate problem. Most scientific research work actually use the term we are in a climate catastrophe, that if we do not do something today, then we might run out of time actually to contain this situation. So we have seen, the problem with climate change is that it is closely intertwined with other problems in the society. We have food security, we have water security, and we have actually insecurity that are occasioned by what we call climate change-induced scarcities in resources. We've heard of, resource-motivated conflicts in areas such as the northeastern part of Kenya, where we have pastoralists relying on livestock keeping as their main source of livelihood. And so climate change sort of affects very many sectors of the economy. And if we let it go untackled today, then we might actually intensify all these other problems. Okay. So it's actually worse problem than people view it today.
It's worse than people think it is. Okay.
Yes.
Let's take a quick break. When you come back, we're still talking about this issue of climate change, and then there's the intergenerational dialogue, which is an important thing, because Eugene says they don't own any land, it's their parents who own the land, but then at the same time, he says that the parents don't know as much as compared to the young people. So how do you bridge that intergenerational gap? That's the conversation we're having just after this, and also more having youth voices being heard in a more sensible manner. Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, use the hashtag Daybreak. We're back right after this break.